Um, so yeah, I'm going to explain sort of why Rapid Fluidics came into being and what we're doing in the world and where we're trying to go from here. So just bear with me while I get myself set up here. So we set up in 2020, so 2.5 years ago, and effectively came from a company developing a point of care microfluidic diagnostic system. And what we found is ultimately, the growth of diagnostics in the world has understandably seen a massive increase in recent years, and we all know why. The average man on the street now knows the term PCR, even if they don't know what it actually means. They know that, say, lab testing gives much better results than lateral flow testing in terms of COVID. And they're coming around to the idea that lab tests don't need to be carried out in a lab. They can be carried out at the point of need, similar to lateral flow tests. And so a lot of our customers are developing these point of care molecular diagnostic systems. So as these systems develop, they're getting smaller and smaller, and people like you can call it an Nespresso style approach to single-use diagnostics. And as they're getting smaller, that's where we get into the world of microfluidics here. And what we've found is a need to develop fully functional prototypes, so we can turn things around in a matter of hours rather than weeks. And this came, as I say, came about to provide a solution to a genuine unmet need. So I used to lead the engineering for a company developing a portable point of care molecular diagnostic system. Find me on LinkedIn, you'll work out who it is. We struggled to make microfluidic prototypes. The in-house fabrication was a little bit iffy, and this is going back 7 or 8 years ago or so now. And outsourced manufacturing just took too long, or they just wasn't good enough. So we linked up with Newcastle University, supervised the PhD, to develop this method of relatively cheaply 3D printing microfluidic prototypes. And so we've ended up that we can offer a 24-hour turnaround of bespoke designs. So it allows our customers to try multiple iterations of early stage designs in a very short space of time, reducing their times and costs of development. One of the reasons that we kind of set up the 3D printing was to bypass the bonding issue. Obviously, there's the traditional methods of producing microfluidics, CNC machining, hot embossing, injection molding, and so forth at scale, and they all require a secondary bonding process. And you've got options like adhesives, you've got solvent diffusion bonding, you've got laser and ultrasonic welding, and they all have a lot of advantages. But obviously we're focusing on 3D printing microfluidics, and we do produce open channels for our customers to seal using whatever techniques they need. But we can avoid the time and expense of these techniques by simply 3D printing a lid directly onto the microfluidic layer. So this has got a lot of advantages. The key one being time. It's done within minutes. But also the lid itself can include additional features, such as more channels with vias linking down between the layers, like a multi-layer PCB. You can apply external connections incorporated, so mounting features for manifolds, barb tube fittings, threaded holes, and that kind of thing. So questions we always get asked, which I'm sure these things will come up later in the chat, so I'm going to beat you to it here. So surface finish, at the moment with the printing technology we've got, we can achieve an RA value of 0.5 microns on the horizontal surface and 1 micron on the vertical channel surface of a square section channel. With circular channels, that obviously changes and gets a bit better. Biocompatible resins, we can comply with the quality requirements for class 1, 2A, 2B, 3 of FDA and ISO 13485 and ISO 10993 for the manufacture of medical devices. We can also work with a local biological lab for specific biocompatibility issues, whether we're looking at new materials against known assays, new assays against known materials, that kind of thing. At the moment, we can achieve an accuracy of about 5% with a print resolution down to 20 microns. And what that means is we can produce fully sealed channels down to about 150 microns wide. So not quite as small as the stuff that Jan's talking about, but small enough that it meets a lot of people's needs. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, that the microfluidic market it's small globally, but there are several companies out there around the world providing prototyping and production services, and have each got their own processing niche. And while all have their respective strengths, we are unique in offering a very short turnaround. We're using modified commercially available 3D printers with much lower overheads to cover. And ultimately, we know that the industry is in agreement that offering prototyping as an outsourced service is a growth industry. Just look at proto labs for more generic prototyping. So de-risking product development for our clients. So from our market research, 95% of our customer base are SMEs favouring low capex outsourced prototyping. And the great thing is, because all the other service providers are ultimately substantially different, it actually opens up potential for a lot of collaboration. So we do talk to the other suppliers and work out ways of working with them to either translate designs for the manufacturing techniques or actually build up hybrid parts, depending on what the customers require. So got a couple of case studies, and this is one of the big ones, really. We've worked closely with Cromec in Sedgefield in County Durham since we started in 2020. So for those that don't know, Cromec's background is radiation detection. So they work with medical, power, defense industries. And through this connection, they're working with DARPA, so as part of the US Department of Defense, on a system for detection of airborne pathogens, which uses microfluidics to ultimately analyze air samples. So early on in the development, we had a situation where translating a particular process to lab on a chip. So it worked on a lab bench, and they were then translating this into microfluidics. They're trying to mix small volumes, I think 4 different liquids. So using a chain of proprietary components, and they simply couldn't do it. The connections, the dead volumes just stopped it actually working. So we were in the lab in the afternoon discussing what aspects of the geometry they actually needed. We sketched it on a whiteboard, modified it in CAD and 3D printed it that evening. It's tested on the lab bench the next day. The fact is, it didn't work, but we changed the design. The next day we had one that did work. And we also sent the design out of quotation from other suppliers. Nothing was available within 7 to 8 weeks and at a considerable cost. So Jamie Marsey, their head of biotech, described it as a game changer. After all, if you're in the situation of developing a diagnostic system, trying to detect a virus that's threatening to wipe out half the population of the world, do you want to wait 8 weeks for your prototype? Do you want to try it tomorrow? So another case study, which I don't actually have a slide, is a project we carried out for CPI, which is the Centre for Process and Innovation, also based in Sedgefield. One of their research groups was optimizing H filtration for particle diffusion between 2 streams of fluid. So they had a range of 30 microfluidic chip designs to test, each with unique geometric characteristics. And they also needed to be able to include lure lock connections for ease of use. And it had to be designed to fit under specific imaging equipment. As with Cromec, we were able to produce those individual designs, so 30 different designs, all relatively quickly, and all delivered within a week. We also work with academic groups. So during the pandemic, there's a research group at Southampton University, and they weren't able to access their own fabrication labs due to the lockdown restrictions. So we made a batch of flow cells for their research work. And following on from that, they realized that, why use the biology researchers to make plastic parts? So we've carried on, and they're outsourced to us, and we've carried on supplying a much larger quantity to them as we've gone forward in the future. So where we are then is we're trying to grow. So as well as the normal customer request that we're dealing with so far, it's 1 of these, 2 of these, 5 of these, maybe 20 of these, that kind of quantities. But we've recently been approached by a number of companies about larger batch production, so scaling up. So, can you make 100 for data generation, 1,000 for preclinical trials? We've had customers asking, can you 3D print tens of thousands of parts for us? At those quantities, it's not really worth investing in injection molding, but it involves a massive scale up. So to allow us to scale up to meet this market, we're engaging in a process to improve efficiency by automating the manufacturing and designing our own specific and exact materials. So we started down this route. We achieved a grant from Innovate UK, which, along with angel investing, is to back it. That's allowing us to push this on. We've moved into larger facilities. Any of you who are connected on LinkedIn will have seen this post go up the other day. We've moved into, I'll say it's not a new building. It's a new building to us. It's an old building. It's terribly insulated and it's bloody freezing at the moment, but we'll figure that one out. We're taking on more people. We're expanding. We've got we're a team of 6 at the moment. We've got a 3rd engineer joining us in the new year, and we plan to grow further on as we go through the year. And we're upgrading our manufacturing equipment. We're going to slowly be upgrading the 3D printers that we're using, both commercially and developing our own equipment, as I say. So we can then expand to meet ever larger networks. So thank you very much for your time. And again, thank you, Jenny, for inviting me to speak here. And if you've got any questions, happy to have a go at answering them. And if not, connect and we can talk later.
Thank you, Paul. And yes, for all the speakers, feel free to put your LinkedIn link in the chat box so people can just connect with you directly, or your email, whatever. You know, you don't, because it's hard to copy and paste from the screen and trying to get connect to you. So we do have questions from the audience. One is from Sheikh. He said, how do you stop internal channels from collapsing? Because from his experience, he found internal channels to be blocked by uncured resin, which is very difficult to remove. I think this is a very common problem.
Absolutely is, and depends on the dimensions, on the geometry that we're looking at. But we use a sacrificial support material where applicable, that we can then remove afterwards.
Wait, what is the material? Sorry, it was fast. I didn't get it.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, okay.
it's a separate support material that we can apply and remove when we need to, and ultimately that's our kind of trade secret. That's why we can do what we can do.
Okay. All right. Well, you're asking the right question then.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is, okay, let's see if you can actually. Yeah. What is a commercial printer you actually use?
Again, it's a range. You know, we've got a variety of SLA and DLP printers from. You know, we've got fairly basic Elegoo Anycubic machines that we do for the simple geometry. We've got a range of DLPs and that we kind of scale up for the higher quality equipment, and they're being integrated into our own customized equipment that we're using at the moment. We've been talking with Corey recently about setting up with the Sega machines as well, and we're looking at all the other options that we can move into.
Cool. All right, Paul, thank you so much.
No worries.
And we're going to move on to Corey.